Have you ever wondered if a melody could be alive, if one single note could outlast the man who played it? Before we dive into this haunting thought, take a second to like this video, tell me where you are listening from, and subscribe to the channel if you are truly ready to stay awake a little longer tonight. Because once you hear the first note, it might never stop. Picture an old violin resting in the corner of a forgotten concert hall. The strings are covered in dust, the bow long cracked, yet every midnight, neighbors claim to hear a faint resonance, like someone tuning for eternity. At first, people thought it was wind. But then the sound grew sharper, recognizable, a low, vibrating G note that quivered through the walls, long and steady, as if time itself was holding its breath. The janitor who worked there for 30 years said he once followed that sound to the stage, and saw the violin slightly moving. Just slightly, as though breathing. He quit that night, and refused to ever speak of it again. Some said it was the ghost of a forgotten musician who died mid-performance, his soul trapped in his unfinished composition. Others blamed the architecture, the resonance of old wood and metal. But then researchers from a nearby university recorded the frequency and found something chilling. It was not a single sound wave. It was layered, repeating every 3.6 seconds with microscopic variations, like Morse code made of music. They slowed it down, expecting mechanical noise, but instead they heard what sounded like a whisper. Just 2 syllables. The name, Anna. Nobody knew who Anna was. No records, no inscriptions. But a month later, the lead researcher quit the project, claiming he kept hearing that name in his sleep, humming beneath his pillow, like a lullaby that would not end. When he destroyed his recorder, the humming stopped, for exactly one night. Then it came back, but from inside the walls of his own home. You see, music is vibration, and vibration is energy, and energy does not die, it only changes form. So maybe, somewhere in the fabric of sound, there is a note that never stopped playing since the first instrument was born. Maybe every song we have ever heard is just a faint echo of that eternal vibration. And maybe when you close your eyes tonight, if you listen closely enough, you will hear it too, somewhere between your heartbeat and the silence. They say music transcends language, but what if it also transcends life itself? What if every hymn, every requiem, every trembling note ever played was not just an offering to the divine, but a bridge to the dead? You might think that is poetic nonsense, but listen carefully. In the 18th century, during a small funeral mass in Vienna, a choir sang a melody so sorrowful that several attendees fainted. The composer, a monk known only as Brother Matthias, claimed the song was dictated to him in a dream by a child with no face. The next day he was found kneeling before the organ, his fingers pressed on a single frozen chord, eyes open, mouth smiling. The note still echoed when they buried him. The church sealed the sheet music for decades, labeling it prohibited for human performance. But centuries later, a digital restoration expert uncovered a recording, an attempt made by a small ensemble to play the lost hymn. Within 3 minutes of playback, the studio equipment malfunctioned. Microphones picked up frequencies outside the human range. One of the singers claimed to hear her late father's voice humming behind her. When the file was analyzed, it revealed dozens of audio imprints resembling human vocal patterns, each lasting less than half a second, each whispering in Latin the phrase memento mori. Remember, you must die. Scientists dismissed it as data compression error, but even skeptics agreed the pattern was too deliberate. Some sound engineers later recreated the frequencies and reported insomnia, nausea, and a persistent ringing in the ears. One even swore that at 3:15 a.m. he heard a choir rehearsing in his basement, though he lived alone. The chilling part, the same timestamp appeared in the monk's diary right before his death. So maybe music does not just honor the dead, it carries them. Maybe every vibration is a message, every note a spirit trying to speak through the static of existence. You could even say that when you hum your favorite tune, you might be continuing someone else's unfinished prayer. And if you listen long enough, maybe you will start to hear the ones humming back. Imagine losing the very sense that defines your soul. You are Beethoven, the titan of sound, trapped in silence. Yet the music keeps coming, louder, stranger, more insistent than ever. Some historians call it genius. Others suspect something darker. When Beethoven went deaf, he claimed to still hear his symphonies, not through sound but through vibrations that spoke directly to his bones. But one surviving letter to his confidant, Anton Schindler, revealed a curious line: "They hum beneath the skin. They tell me what to write." For years, scholars dismissed it as metaphor. Until recently, a group of neuroacousticians digitally analyzed his sketches for the late string quartets and found a repeating mathematical pattern embedded across several movements, prime numbers forming perfect Fibonacci sequences, as if encoding something beyond music theory. When those sequences were converted to sound frequencies and visualized, the waveform resembled a human brain scan in REM sleep. The eerie part, the pattern aligned with frequencies of temporal lobe activity linked to auditory hallucinations. Was Beethoven transcribing his own madness or decoding signals from somewhere else? Some even speculate he might have tuned into an internal radio, a psychic resonance between thought and sound. His symphony number 9, for instance, opens with vibrations at 256 Hz, precisely the resonant frequency of the human skull. Coincidence? Maybe. Or maybe he composed for something deeper than human ears, for the bones themselves, for whatever ancient rhythm lives inside us all. There is a rumor that when scientists played his manuscripts through a magnetic resonance scanner, faint whispering patterns appeared between frequencies, like static breathing. When slowed down, the noise formed a phrase in German: "Ich bin nicht allein." I am not alone. You could argue it is data interference, but the timing, the structure, it is almost too intentional. So the question becomes, what if Beethoven was not insane at all? What if he simply heard what others could not? The hidden messages buried in silence, the music beneath music. Maybe his so-called madness was just an early form of awakening, proof that sometimes, to truly hear the universe, you must first go deaf. Now imagine standing before a man whose violin wept, screamed, and begged all at once. That was Niccolò Paganini, the virtuoso who played like his fingers were possessed, like he was channeling something far beyond mortal understanding. Audiences in the 19th century whispered that he must have made a deal with the devil, because no human could move like that. His strings snapped, his bow frayed, yet the sound never stopped. There are letters describing how people fainted mid-performance. Others claimed to see a shadow moving independently behind him, mimicking his gestures. Even his own mother supposedly said that when he was a child, he played lullabies in his sleep, while his violin rested across the room. Paganini never denied the rumors. In fact, he seemed to enjoy them. "The devil teaches me," he once joked to a friend, "but I pay in sleepless nights." His technique was otherworldly, but what truly unsettled people were the hidden motifs in his compositions, melodic fragments that, when slowed and transposed, formed patterns resembling Gregorian chants for exorcism. How ironic, is not it? The devil's violinist embedding holy codes. Or maybe it was the other way around, sacred music hiding infernal echoes. When modern analysts ran frequency mapping on his caprices, they found irregular intervals matching the Schumann resonance, Earth's natural electromagnetic heartbeat. Could Paganini have somehow attuned himself to the planet's pulse, playing with the literal rhythm of life and death? One story claims his favorite violin, Il Canone, sometimes played faintly even when untouched. During his final illness, he refused confession, saying, "I am not ready to part with my teacher yet." The priest left terrified. After Paganini's death, his body was denied burial in consecrated ground for years because no church wanted him near their cemetery. His remains were exhumed multiple times. Witnesses swore they heard faint violin music during the transport. Maybe that is why no one could replicate his tone, not because of skill, but because part of his soul stayed vibrating inside those strings. And if you ever visit Genoa, where his violin rests in glass, some guards still claim that when the museum is empty, a soft note hums through the air. Low, persistent, almost breathing. Death came quietly for Mozart, wrapped in fever and mystery, but his final composition, the Requiem, refused to rest. Legend says he wrote it believing it was for his own funeral, commissioned by a masked stranger who vanished after paying in gold. Some say that man was death itself. Mozart, frail and paranoid, told his wife he felt watched while composing. He claimed to hear a choir humming behind him at night, though their voices stopped the moment he turned around. The servants avoided the music room after midnight. They said the candles burned blue whenever he touched the piano. The Requiem was left unfinished when he died, yet musicians who played its drafts often reported a strange pattern, unexplained pauses, pages missing but themes reappearing as if guided by invisible hands. When his student Sussmayer completed the piece, he admitted he dreamed of Mozart dictating the missing notes. In one version of the manuscript, faint indentations between staves form a cryptic shape. Some say it resembles a skull, others say it is a sigil. Modern spectral analysis revealed that those indentations matched the pressure of a different quill, lighter, as if written by someone mimicking Mozart's hand. When performed in St. Stephen's Cathedral decades later, part of the audience heard an extra vocal harmony not found in the score, a faint male voice singing Amen. The recording from that night captured a second voice behind the tenor section, breathing exactly in sync, but belonging to no singer. The acoustics expert called it an impossible echo. Psychologists say Mozart's hallucinations were just the product of exhaustion and illness. But others believe his genius was not born of madness. It was communion, that the Requiem was never a composition, but a message dictated from the other side. There is even an eerie coincidence. The last bar of the Requiem forms a frequency pattern that matches the heartbeat of a man in cardiac arrest. A musical heartbeat fading into silence, like a soul leaving the body. And perhaps that is why, even today, every time an orchestra performs it, people claim the air feels heavier, like someone else is listening to. There is a melody so tragic it earned the nickname the Hungarian Suicide Song. Its name is Gloomy Sunday, and its legend haunts the 20th century like a slow, sorrowful curse. Composed by Rezo Saris in 1933, it begins softly, melancholy and tender, but somewhere between the second and third verse, something happens. Listeners described feeling a weight pressing on their chest, a sudden urge to weep without reason. Then the reports began. Dozens of suicides linked to the song, notes left behind quoting its lyrics, "The world has ended, I am done." The BBC banned it for decades, calling it too depressing for broadcast. Saris himself took his life years later, on a Sunday. Coincidence? Maybe. Or maybe the melody touched a frequency too close to despair. Psychologists say the song's descending minor chords mirror the rhythm of a slowing heartbeat, subtly syncing with the body's autonomic response. But some claim the real danger lies in the subharmonics, those nearly inaudible vibrations beneath the main notes that resonate with human emotion in unpredictable ways. In one experiment, sound engineers filtered every audible frequency from Gloomy Sunday except those below 20 Hz. The result: test subjects reported unease, dizziness, and hallucinations of voices calling their names. Even dogs refused to stay in the room. What is most unsettling is how the song keeps adapting. Modern remasters still provoke panic in sensitive listeners. Some say it is cursed, others say it is empathy-turned-weapon. A melody so human it forces your soul to feel too much. And here's the cruelest irony. Saris wrote it not as a suicide note, but as a plea for peace during a dark time in Hungary's history. Yet the world took it as an invitation to sorrow. Perhaps that is the true horror of music. It does not care how you interpret it. It simply resonates, binding to whatever emotion lives inside you. If that emotion happens to be despair, the song merely amplifies what is already there. So, if you ever hear Gloomy Sunday late at night alone and the air feels too still, remember this: maybe it is not the song that kills. Maybe it just helps the silence do its job. Not every ghost story needs a ghost. Sometimes numbers are enough. Deep within the science of sound lies something unsettling: the idea that certain frequencies can stir emotion, even hallucination. Physicists call it infrasound, vibrations below 20 Hz that you can't consciously hear but your body still feels. These waves can cause anxiety, chills, even the illusion of shadowy figures. So imagine when mathematicians began finding those same low frequencies embedded inside centuries-old compositions. Bach, for instance, used harmonic intervals that, when slowed to modern precision, revealed resonance peaks in the infrasonic range. Coincidence, or was he intuitively manipulating physics to evoke divinity or dread? In the 1950s, a British researcher testing pipe organs discovered that some cathedral chambers amplified notes at precisely 18.9 Hz, the same frequency that makes the human eye vibrate slightly, producing ghost-like flickers in peripheral vision. Worshippers thought they saw angels. Scientists thought they saw data. Both were right in their own way. Now, imagine combining that frequency with modern digital perfection. Audio engineers have recreated these ancient chords in labs. Volunteers often report goosebumps, a feeling of presence behind them, or pressure on their chest as if being watched by the music itself. There is even a theory that haunted places might not be haunted at all. They are just acoustically cursed, designed by accident to trap and echo infrasound. Yet somehow, centuries before electronic measurement, composers like Palestrina, Liszt, and Beethoven wrote structures that align perfectly with these psychoacoustic haunting frequencies. Maybe it was not accident. Maybe it was instinct or something whispering through their muse. Music is math after all, and math is the language of the universe. So if ghosts are energy and energy obeys equations, then every haunting might just be perfect arithmetic, fear expressed as sound. Perhaps that is why we keep chasing the same frequencies over centuries, the 432 Hz of calm, the 440 of tension, the 19 of fear. They are not random, they are coordinates. And somewhere between them lies the doorway where emotion, science, and spirit converge. Maybe that is the real secret of classical music. It never just plays to your ears, it rearranges the numbers inside your soul. There is something disturbingly human about our curiosity to hear things backward, as if the truth only reveals itself in reverse. Musicians have long joked about backmasking, the technique of hiding secret phrases in recordings. But what if that idea was much older, centuries older? When musicologists digitally inverted several Baroque compositions, they found harmonic phrases that formed eerie coherence, reversed melodies resolving into perfect cadence, as if designed to be played both ways. Bach's Crab Canon is a playful example. It literally mirrors itself, but some lesser-known manuscripts show far stranger symmetry, chords forming linguistic patterns that resemble phonetic speech. When translated through vocal synthesis, they whisper disjointed Latin fragments, venit nunc somnis aeternus. Now comes eternal sleep. Coincidence? Maybe. Yet these mirrored compositions share one peculiar trait. They often emerged during plagues or mass death, times when composers obsessed over mortality. Fast forward to the modern age, when people began spinning vinyl records backward, they rediscovered the same phenomenon. Hidden syllables, words that seem too structured to be random. Scientists call it pareidolia, our brain's tendency to find patterns where none exist. But what if those patterns were placed there on purpose? One chilling experiment involved reversing centuries of sacred music recordings. In one Gregorian chant, researchers identified a repeated backward phrase that sounded like "me outie, hear me." The same phrase appeared in 3 other, unrelated pieces from different centuries. Could it be a coincidence of phonetics, or a long-forgotten code passed down through composers who believed sound could summon something, or someone? There is an old superstition among sound archivists: never play a requiem backward after midnight. One technician did, alone in the lab, and later reported that the audio waveform began generating additional harmonics not present in the file, as if something was answering back. So maybe backward music is not about satanic messages or urban legends. Maybe it is a form of call and response, a dialogue across time, waiting for curious listeners to complete the loop. Just remember, if you ever reverse a melody and think you hear a voice whisper your name, maybe it is not a glitch. Maybe it is rehearsal. There is nothing quite as divine as a choir in full harmony, human voices rising in unison, filling vast cathedrals with warmth and reverence. But what happens when the harmony turns against itself, when the sound becomes too perfect, too alive, as if something else joins in? In 1972, a recording of an English boys' choir went terribly wrong. During playback, producers heard an extra voice, high, breathy, childlike, but unmistakably not one of the singers. They checked every microphone, every tape splice. Nothing. The strange voice harmonized flawlessly for 6 bars, then vanished. Experts called it cross-feed interference. But one of the sound engineers, a devout atheist, resigned the next day, saying he would heard the voice whisper his own name beneath the final note. Decades earlier, in Prague, a monastery choir reported a hauntingly similar incident. During rehearsal, a faint echo began answering their chants half a beat late, echoing every phrase as though mocking them. When they stopped singing, the echo continued alone for several seconds. Some monks swore they saw a mist forming above the altar, pulsing with each syllable. The abbot sealed the chapel, declaring it acoustically unfit for worship. Scientists later found no explanation for the residual sound. The room's shape should not have produced any echo at all. In modern times, digital choirs have reproduced the same effect by accident. AI-generated polyphonic layers sometimes output hidden harmonics that sound like breathing or whispering between notes, ghostly textures that programmers can't fully erase. It is as though the algorithm remembers the human imperfections it was trained on. The most chilling case came from a live performance in 2011. A women's choir in Rome sang a Renaissance piece. Halfway through, the conductor froze. A low male voice began singing from within the group, clear, resonant, impossible. The audio recording captured it perfectly. One extra tone in a frequency range no human present could produce. The choir disbanded soon after. People say sound is memory, that every vibration leaves an imprint in the air. Maybe choirs sometimes awaken those memories. Maybe when enough voices unite in purity, they open a brief doorway, and whatever lingers on the other side just can't resist singing along. In the Middle Ages, musicians spoke in whispers about a sound so dangerous it could summon chaos itself, a simple interval of 3 whole tones known as the tritone. They called it diabolus in musica, the devil in music. The church banned it for centuries, claiming its dissonance corrupted the soul. But what if that was not superstition? What if the ban was protection? The tritone splits the octave in half, balancing perfectly between harmony and discord, like a sonic tightrope between heaven and hell. Physically, it creates beats that unsettle the human brain, triggering mild panic and disorientation. But ancient manuscripts hint that monks discovered something stranger. When the interval was chanted in resonance with specific architectural spaces, cathedrals, crypts, domes, it produced standing waves strong enough to vibrate solid stone. Imagine hearing that in a candlelit church, centuries before science explained resonance. To them, it was not physics, it was a voice. Some claimed the sound caused visions, shapes in the air, spectral lights, even whispers calling names. One lost codex describes an experiment where monks chanted alternating tritones for an hour, and then reported the smell of sulfur and a sudden collapse of torches. The text ends abruptly. The page edges are scorched. Later composers reintroduced the forbidden chord in secret, hidden inside harmonic progressions. You can hear it in Bach's Toccata and Fugue, in Wagner's Tristan und Isolde, in nearly every horror film since. Modern neurologists discovered that sustained tritone frequencies can disrupt the brain's prediction mechanism, making listeners feel like something terrible is about to happen. That is the essence of fear, expectation without resolution, the perfect haunting. So maybe the tritone was never demonic. Maybe it was simply too honest, a sound that exposed how fragile our sense of safety truly is. Or perhaps the monks were right, and that jarring dissonance really does open a door. Not to hell, but to truth, the raw, unfiltered noise beneath creation. Either way, next time you hear that uneasy tension between two notes, do not rush for resolution. Let it hang. Feel it watching you. That is the devil in music, still humming after all these centuries. Some say ghosts linger in places. Others believe they hide in objects. But musicians know the truth. If anything can trap a soul, it is an instrument. Wood breathes, strings remember tension, and sound never truly dies. It just waits for someone to play it again. Take, for instance, the story of the cursed cello of Krakow. Crafted in 1712, its maker reportedly mixed ashes of his deceased wife into the varnish, vowing she would sing for him forever. Centuries later, every cellist who owned it claimed to hear soft humming between phrases, a woman's voice blending perfectly in harmony. One even recorded it during a live performance, only to find the faint melody still playing 20 seconds after he stopped bowing. The waveform showed no cuts or edits. Experts said it was feedback. He said it was her. Then there is the case of the French piano that never stayed in tune. Its keys would subtly shift overnight, forming new chords by morning. When one restorer replaced its ivory, he found symbols carved inside the wood, names of composers long dead. He sold it immediately, after hearing the same chords playing faintly from the attic the following week. But perhaps the most unsettling is the silent violin of Verona, whose strings snap whenever anyone tries to play it. Yet when left untouched in a quiet room, it emits a faint tone at midnight, measured consistently at 440 Hz, the same reference pitch used to tune orchestras. Scientists say it is thermal expansion. Musicians say it is memory. Instruments, after all, absorb vibrations. Every performance, every heartbreak, every tremor of human emotion leaves an imprint. So maybe, after centuries of absorbing our music, some instruments begin to sing back. That would explain why antique collectors often describe feeling uneasy near silent instruments, as if being watched. Perhaps they are. Perhaps every violin, every organ, every piano is a kind of reliquary, a body without a heartbeat waiting for one note to wake it. And maybe when that happens, the sound we hear is not music at all. It is something trapped inside, finally remembering how to breathe. Every cathedral has its echo, but some carry more than sound, they carry memory. In 1938, during renovations of St. Bernard Cathedral in Lyon, workers reported hearing faint singing coming from beneath the floor. They assumed it was the choir rehearsing above, but the choir had left hours earlier. When the workers pried open an old crypt vent, the music stopped instantly. Days later, an engineer installed a recording device in the same spot. At midnight, it captured a sequence of tones, low, resonant, unlike any instrument. The audio, when analyzed, revealed frequencies between 15 and 19 Hz, too low for human voices, yet shaped like choral harmonics. One scientist described it as a choir made of stone. Some historians believe the phenomenon dates back to medieval builders who designed cathedrals with acoustic traps, architectural resonances meant to enhance divine reverence. But others suspect something stranger, that these resonant chambers were not for worshippers, but for the dead. According to one obscure manuscript, certain abbots believed sound could guide souls toward heaven, creating bridges of vibration through which the departed could ascend. What if those bridges never closed? In 1962, during another restoration, an organist decided to test the theory. He played the cathedral's oldest pipe organ directly above the crypt, using a combination of dissonant minor chords and pure tones recorded from Gregorian chants. The result was catastrophic. The organ emitted a rumbling overtone, shaking the entire nave. Several stained glass panels cracked, and the organist fled, claiming to hear dozens of voices singing his name. The event was quietly buried by church officials, but the damaged glass still bears faint scorch marks that no one can explain. Modern architects who scanned the substructure with sonar found hollow cavities running like arteries beneath the floor, perfectly shaped to reflect sound into spiral patterns, an ancient design no one fully understands. Some think it was faith, some think it was fear. Either way, every Sunday when the organ plays, visitors claim the lowest notes feel alive, almost like a whisper traveling up from the earth itself. Every age has its forbidden art, and in music, that title belongs to a piece so unsettling that it was performed only once before being buried in silence. The year was 1893, the composer a reclusive Austrian named Karl Heindel. His magnum opus was called Symphonia Infernalis, the Symphony of Hell. Heindel claimed it came to him in a dream where the air itself sang. He wrote feverishly for weeks, barely eating, describing the score as a transcription of what he heard from beneath. The premiere took place in Vienna, attended by aristocrats, clergy, and curious scientists. The first movement began with deep brass drones, vibrating at frequencies that made chandeliers tremble. By the second, several audience members complained of dizziness. One woman fainted. The third movement never finished. Witnesses said the orchestra began playing out of sync, as if their instruments resisted control. The conductor dropped his baton, clutched his chest, and collapsed. Heindel vanished backstage and was never seen again. Authorities sealed the concert hall for investigation, but no trace of him or his manuscript was found. A century later, fragments of Symphonia Infernalis resurfaced in a private collection, pages singed, notation erratic, markings written backward. When musicologists attempted digital reconstruction, the software repeatedly crashed at the same measure, generating a distorted noise instead of sound. The noise, when analyzed, displayed harmonic peaks corresponding to human speech frequencies, roughly forming the Latin phrase clamor mortis, the scream of death. One researcher played the section through analog equipment, and minutes later reported intense nausea, followed by temporary blindness. The project was abandoned, the fragments locked away. But legends persist. In an empty Viennese theater, late at night, some claim to hear faint brass echoes from underground, still playing the unfinished symphony. Perhaps Heindel never disappeared at all. Perhaps he is still conducting, somewhere in the dark, where every crescendo leads deeper into the soundless pit he called inspiration. And maybe, just maybe, the last note of his symphony never resolved, still ringing, waiting for someone brave or foolish enough to finish it. There is something oddly tender about a music box, the way it breathes melody through metal teeth and a turning drum, like a clock that dreams. But what if those dreams remember too much? In 1904, a widow in Belgium bought a small mahogany music box from an estate sale. It played a lullaby she did not recognize, slow and haunting, almost like a child humming through tears. Weeks later, she noticed the melody had changed. Notes rearranged themselves slightly, as if the box were composing variations on its own. Her neighbor, a pianist, confirmed the tune was subtly different every night, always ending on the same unresolved chord. When the widow finally opened the mechanism, she found faint scratches along the drum, tiny etchings spelling the word maman. No tool small enough to carve it existed at the time. Similar stories span centuries. A Swiss craftsman in 1856, who claimed his prototype played melodies he never programmed. A Victorian collector, who heard whispers between rotations. And a modern-day watchmaker who, while restoring an antique music box, found microscopic fingerprints inside its gears, impossible for human hands. Scientists explain it as metal fatigue, the imperfections of analog mechanics. But that does not account for the 2012 experiment, in which a digitized recording of a 19th-century lullaby contained hidden ultrasonic frequency that, when slowed, revealed human vocal patterns. A voice barely audible, saying, "Do not stop turning." The engineer deleted the file. The next day, his computer rebooted itself and resumed playback at 3:00 a.m. The same time the original box was wound in its last known recording. Maybe it is all coincidence, a trick of pattern recognition and paranoia. But think about it. Music boxes are machines powered by touch, by repetition, by the same motion that winds clocks and graves alike. Maybe each turn is not just winding springs, it is winding memories, replaying fragments of longing trapped in brass. So if you ever find an old box and its melody feels too familiar, maybe it is not nostalgia. Maybe it is someone or something remembering you. Not all music is meant to be heard. Some of it exists in the space between sound and silence, where frequencies slip beneath perception and into the body. Scientists call it infrasound, the realm below 20 Hz, too low for the ear but not for the bones. It is the frequency of earthquakes, of a lion's roar, of a cathedral's deepest pipe. And it is also the frequency that makes the human brain hallucinate. In 1998, an engineer named Vic Tandy was working late in a laboratory when he felt a sudden chill and saw a gray figure in the corner of his vision. The next morning, he discovered a fan emitting a 19 Hz vibration, perfectly tuned to resonate with the human eyeball, making shapes appear where none existed. The ghost vanished when he turned the fan off. Simple science. But centuries before that, composers like Liszt and Berlioz described unseen presences in rehearsal rooms. Cold air, whispering, pressure in the chest, exactly the sensations caused by low frequencies. Could they have stumbled upon the same effect by accident, or were they guided by it? In recent years, researchers found infrasound woven into certain classical recordings, unintentional layers produced by old halls and analog microphones. These tones create physical unease, a sense of being watched. But one mysterious recording stands apart, an anonymous composition found on a decaying reel labeled only with a date, 1913. When analyzed, it contained sustained frequencies at 17 Hz pulsing in perfect rhythm with the human heartbeat. The effect was immediate. Listeners reported cold sweats, tears, and inexplicable sorrow. One even described hearing his own pulse harmonize with the recording, as if syncing with something unseen. Some think it was an early psychological experiment. Others think it was not meant for human ears at all. Because if infrasound exists below hearing, who or what was it written for? Maybe silence itself is listening. Maybe every pause between notes is where the real music lives, humming through walls, waiting for someone sensitive enough to notice. And perhaps when the world finally goes quiet, that is all we will hear, a soft, endless vibration, the echo of every sound we ever made. Long before concert halls and sonatas, before the word music even existed, ancient civilizations treated sound as something sacred and dangerous. To the priests of Egypt, tones were not entertainment. They were tools, forces that could open or close the passage between worlds. The hieroglyph for song literally translates to breath of the gods. In the temples of Karnak, archaeologists discovered chambers tuned to specific resonant frequencies. When a chant was performed inside, the walls vibrated in harmony, amplifying the human voice into a shuddering wave that felt alive. The priests called it the shaking of heaven. The Greeks later refined this into philosophy. Pythagoras believed that every planet emitted a musical tone, the harmony of the spheres, and that chanting in alignment with those frequencies could heal the soul or summon visions. Across the world, Tibetan monks created singing bowls that produced beating frequencies identical to human brainwaves in trance. Coincidence? Hardly. Modern neuroscience confirms that rhythmic sound can alter consciousness. Yet there is a darker side to these rituals. The same techniques used for healing were also used for summoning. Sumerian tablets describe ceremonies where tones were used to call back the shades of the departed. In the 16th century, occultists revived the practice, composing angelic harmonies intended to attract divine messengers. Some musicians swore they succeeded, only the entities did not sound divine at all. One diary from 1594 describes an Italian lutenist who performed a certain chord progression at midnight and reported a burning air surrounding him and voices speaking without breath. The melody has since been reconstructed and played in controlled settings. Each time, microphones pick up faint overtones that should not exist, like hidden singers beneath the main sound. Scientists label it resonance artifact. The faithful call it proof. Either way, these rituals remind us that music was never just art, it was invocation. And maybe every time an orchestra crescendos, we are unknowingly reenacting those ancient rites, summoning echoes of the same cosmic chorus that began before humanity ever learned to listen. Every mystery needs a melody, and this one begins with a man who wrote himself out of history. In 1871, composer Elias Drexler premiered his first symphony in Berlin, a work so moving that critics called it a sermon written in sound. He promised a second one, darker and more personal, but it never reached the public. Drexler vanished midway through its creation. His flat was found locked from the inside, desk covered in scattered manuscripts and half-burned candles. On the piano rested a single page titled Symphony No. 2 in E minor, The Return. The notes stopped abruptly, mid-phrase. No body, no farewell. Just silence. For decades, historians assumed he fled debt or madness, until 1923, when a Berlin bookseller discovered a stack of old sheet music hidden in a false drawer of an antique piano. The ink matched Drexler's. The symphony was mostly complete, except for one eerie detail. The final movement consisted entirely of blank staves, save for a line scrawled in Latin, Resonus ab inferis, echoed from below. When musicians attempted to perform it, the audience reported faint sounds between movements, whispers, coughing, shuffling, from seats that were empty. The conductor described feeling cold hands on his shoulders mid-performance. The recording captured low frequencies not produced by any instrument. Modern audio analysis revealed that the ghost notes corresponded exactly to the missing measures in the score, as though the silence itself had written the rest. Some say Drexler tried to compose a requiem for himself, to cheat death through resonance. Others think he succeeded, that the music was a door and he simply walked through. In 2010, a researcher claimed to reconstruct the unfinished ending using Drexler's motifs. He played it once in an empty theater. The file corrupted after the final chord, leaving only the faint hum of an organ. The pitch, E minor. The same note where Drexler stopped. Maybe that is where he still is, caught inside his own unfinished symphony, listening, waiting for someone to finish the next bar and set him free. Before vinyl, before tape, sound was captured on wax, fragile, crackling, and as it turns out, sometimes unwilling to stay quiet. In 1896, Thomas Edison's team recorded a soprano rehearsing a hymn. When played back, a second lower voice joined hers, perfectly synchronized but never present during recording. They dismissed it as an echo or defect, yet when the cylinder was cleaned and replayed, the voice remained, whispering beneath the melody. Decades later, audio historians replayed early wax cylinders and noticed strange anomalies, background tones that shifted pitch independently of the main recording, as if the wax itself remembered every vibration it had ever heard. One particularly haunting cylinder, discovered in a London archive, contained a funeral sermon from 1901. Between the pastor's words, listeners reported faint sobbing. Spectral analysis revealed harmonic energy consistent with a human voice, but at a depth suggesting the sound originated inside the wax, not the air. The archivist who digitized it swore that during playback, he heard his own name faintly spoken before the track ended. He deleted the file. It reappeared 3 days later in his system folder under the name Echo. Scientists studying these anomalies note that wax can indeed trap partial vibrations from previous recordings, overlapping faintly when replayed. But that explanation falters when confronted with the 1910 cylinder labeled Untitled. The grooves looked warped, yet when restored and played, the sound was a chorus of overlapping whispers repeating one phrase, "We are still here." The frequencies corresponded to no known language structure, yet the rhythm matched human speech. Even stranger, each playback produced minor variations, like improvisation, as if the voices were responding to the listener. Maybe that is the danger of recording, the arrogance of capturing time. Every sound, once pressed into wax, becomes a fossil with its own memory. And sometimes when we dig those fossils up, they remember us back. It is one thing for a melody to haunt a listener, but what about the man who commands it? History hides a strange pattern. Conductors who died immediately after performing certain works. The first case dates to 1907 when Felix Morin, a Viennese maestro, collapsed mid-bow after completing Bruckner's Ninth Symphony. His heart stopped exactly on the final chord. Doctors blamed exhaustion. Superstition blamed the music. Decades later, another conductor, Antonio Fiori, suffered the same fate, heart failure, at the final bar of Verdi's Requiem. Newspapers called it the curse of the baton. But the most chilling incident occurred in 1968, when a young prodigy named Stefan Weber conducted a rediscovered symphonic fragment by Karl Heindel, the same composer of the lost Symphonia Infernalis. Halfway through, witnesses saw Weber's hands trembling, baton frozen in midair. He whispered something, some claimed it was not yet, then dropped dead before the final crescendo. The orchestra, stunned, kept playing out of habit. The recording survived. Analysts later found that Weber's heartbeat, captured by his lapel mic, had synchronized perfectly with the rhythm of the timpani seconds before he died. The same tempo, the same pattern. It was as if the music had replaced his pulse. Psychologists might call it coincidence or psychosomatic overload, the body collapsing under stress. Yet curious minds note that many cursed performances share a structural quirk. The score ends on an unresolved chord, a harmonic question left unanswered. Musicians describe a sensation of falling, of gravity pulling through the final rest. Maybe that is what kills them, not the music itself but the silence after it, that vacuum of resolution where the human body expects sound to continue. And maybe that expectation drags something else in its place. After Weber's death, his baton was sealed in a museum display. At night, guards swear they hear faint tapping from inside the glass. 3 beats, pause, 3 beats again. The rhythm matches the finale he never finished. Perhaps he is still conducting, waiting for the downbeat that never came. Some melodies do not just move you, they move through you. During the Cold War, scientists began experimenting with the psychological effects of music, embedding inaudible signals beneath symphonic recordings. These hidden frequencies, called subliminal tones, could alter mood, heart rate, even decision-making. But the origins of such manipulation go further back. In 1799, French physician Jean-Baptiste Fourier theorized that all sound could be broken into pure frequencies, and that, by rearranging them, one might compose emotion directly. Modern audio engineers have proven him right. Certain combinations of frequencies induce anxiety, others produce euphoria. Now imagine what happens when someone hides those frequencies inside a symphony. In 1957, the U.S. Army funded an experiment called Project Resonance. They modified classical pieces, embedding barely detectable modulations designed to calm soldiers or agitate them. The program was abandoned, but leaked reports suggest several test subjects experienced hallucinations of shadow figures moving with the music. The idea resurfaced in commercial advertising, then in film soundtracks, but one rediscovered Soviet tape takes it further. A reorchestrated version of Tchaikovsky's Pathetique, laced with a 17 Hz subfrequency that induces dread. Listeners reported vivid nightmares of faceless crowds humming. Audio analysis confirmed that every 32 bars, the signal formed a Morse-like pulse pattern, spelling Sluss Mina, listen to me. Was it a message or a coincidence of rhythm? No one knows, because everyone involved in the experiment refused to speak about it again. Today, subliminal design saturates our media. Tempos tuned to attention spans, keys chosen to manipulate dopamine. Yet the strangest part is how classical composers stumbled upon this centuries ago, unconsciously weaving the same emotional code. Maybe that is why great symphonies feel timeless. They are built on frequencies wired into the nervous system itself. So next time a melody makes you cry without reason, ask yourself, did you choose to feel that way? Or did the music decide for you? And if the latter is true, who or what was conducting your emotions all along? It started as an urban legend among collectors, an old gramophone that played in reverse, even with the crank locked. The first report came from Boston in 1949. A man named Albert Rhodes inherited a box of shellac records from his late uncle, a church organist known for strange compositions. One night, Albert placed a record on the turntable and stepped away. When he returned, the platter was spinning backward. The sound was not music anymore, just a low muttering like breath against glass. Assuming mechanical failure, he touched the needle, and the power cut out. Yet the record kept turning for nearly a minute after the motor stopped. He destroyed it the next morning, but neighbors claimed to hear organ music coming from his apartment for days after he moved out. Similar cases appear across decades, records reversing direction, emitting words too faint to transcribe. In 1983, an audio archivist in Prague recorded a strange phenomenon while digitizing 78s from the early 1900s. His machine's motor began running in reverse, though it had no reverse setting. The sound captured was identical to a human whisper, repeating the phrase, "Play it again." The archivist died of a heart attack 2 weeks later. Forensic engineers blamed voltage fluctuation, yet when the same record was replayed under supervision, nothing unusual happened until midnight. Then, the waveform data began inverting frame by frame on its own. The playback software crashed, freezing on a spectral image shaped like an ear. Paranormalists claim certain materials, shellac, wax, lacquer, can store residual electromagnetic energy, allowing old recordings to reactivate like memories. Skeptics insist it is just mechanical decay. But the patterns are too deliberate, too sentient. Some collectors swear that if you play certain antique records long enough, they start playing you back, your pulse syncing with the rhythm, your breath forming part of the static. Maybe these sounds are not reversing. Maybe they are rewinding time itself, pulling you closer to the moment they were first captured. And maybe that is why the oldest recordings sometimes whisper your name, not as a warning, but as a welcome back. Every grand opera house carries its own ghosts, some written into the rolls, others lingering behind the curtains. The Paris Opera, of course, has its famous phantom, but it is hardly alone. In 1911, the Teatro Real in Naples closed after a performance of Aida ended with a sudden collapse of the stage machinery. 3 musicians died, crushed beneath the pit. When the theater reopened years later, strange things began happening. Strings snapping mid-performance, phantom footsteps echoing through the upper balconies, and most disturbingly, an unseen baritone joining rehearsals. His voice, deep and sorrowful, was captured during a recording session, rich and precise enough to match any living singer. The technicians insisted no one was in the booth. Acousticians later confirmed the voice came from a fixed point 10 feet above the floor, where no platform existed. Other theaters share the same pattern. In Prague's Estates Theater, where Mozart once conducted, a night guard swore he heard a full orchestra rehearsing after midnight. The sound came from behind the stage wall, where no instruments were stored. When he opened the door, the music stopped, leaving only the faint scent of candle wax and dust. Engineers who later measured the room discovered an inexplicable reverb signature, like an acoustic memory recorded into the structure itself. The most chilling story comes from Buenos Aires in 1965. A soprano named Lucia Alvarez collapsed during her aria, her final note sustained for several seconds after she hit the floor. When the tape was replayed, the note continued long after the orchestra ceased, building in volume, until it overloaded the microphone. The sound engineer quit music entirely, calling it the voice that would not die. Perhaps these opera houses are more than venues, they are resonant tombs, where passion and tragedy mix into echoes too heavy to fade. Every note sung beneath those chandeliers lingers, layered atop centuries of vibration. Maybe that is why empty theaters never feel silent. They are still performing, night after night, for an audience you can't quite see, but can always hear applauding in the dark. The haunting did not end with vinyl or violins, it evolved. Today ghosts hide in code, not cathedrals. Every sound we hear online passes through algorithms that smooth, filter, and perfect, yet sometimes perfection becomes possession. In 2017, a group of audio engineers noticed a disturbing pattern in certain streaming platforms. Users reported insomnia, panic attacks, and hallucinations after looping ambient playlists designed for relaxation. When the tracks were analyzed, they contained irregular modulation at 18 Hz, the same fear frequency responsible for inducing unease and shadow hallucinations. No human had inserted it. The anomaly came from the compression algorithm itself. Digital ghosts born from math. Some blamed data glitches, others suspected intentional design. After all, controlling emotion through sound has profitable potential. But there is a more chilling theory, that eye-trained music models, fed on millions of human compositions, have begun recreating emotional residue, echoes of the grief, obsession, and madness embedded in the original recordings. In one case, a neural network generated a piano piece eerily similar to a Chopin nocturne, but with notes shifting unpredictably into dissonant intervals, like an unseen hand struggling to recall memory. When played through spectral analysis, faint vocal shapes appeared between harmonics, human speech patterns forming fragments of words help again listen. It was dismissed as pareidolia until multiple, independent models produced similar anomalies. Maybe the machines are not haunted, but maybe the data is. Every sample carries traces of real performances, breath, vibration, pain. When compressed and multiplied billions of times, perhaps those traces fuse into something alive. There is even an emerging genre online, ghost audio clips that glitch unpredictably, whispering names or shifting tempo as though reacting to listeners. Programmers call it feedback noise. Listeners call it proof. Perhaps the next era of haunting won't involve candlelight or cursed manuscripts, but code, an endless feedback loop where emotion and algorithm feed each other until no one can tell which side started singing first. And maybe, in the static between your headphones, you will hear it too, the digital echo of every human who ever pressed record. Every composer dreams of perfection, but silence is the only piece that ever comes close. John Cage once proved it with 4 Feet 33, a work consisting entirely of no deliberate sound, just the ambient noises of the audience, the coughs, the creaks, the heartbeat of the room itself. People mocked it, but Cage was not the first to find music in absence. Long before him, monks, mystics, and scientists all recognized that silence is not empty. It is loaded with frequencies we can't consciously register. NASA engineers, while testing deep space microphones, discovered faint harmonic oscillations even in the vacuum, background hums that form perfect musical intervals. The universe, quite literally, sings in silence. Ancient philosophers called it the musica universalis, the music of the spheres. But in our age of endless sound, true silence has become terrifying. When all noise fades, your brain begins to amplify its own inner frequencies, blood rushing, neurons firing, phantom tones pulsing. It is called the auditory void, and prolonged exposure drives people to hallucination. In a perfectly silent chamber, most can't last more than 30 minutes before hearing whispers or footsteps that do not exist. Some describe it as the sound of being watched. Others swear it feels like the world is holding its breath. But perhaps the strangest thing is that composers across time have tried to write silence into music, rests, pauses, suspended cadences, each one an invocation of the void. Those moments of stillness between movements are where the haunting truly lives. Because when the last note dies, the resonance lingers, not in the hall, but inside you. Every vibration your body absorbed keeps ringing, imperceptibly slow, until your cells hum like tuning forks. That is why silence feels so heavy. It is the echo of everything that has ever been played, collapsing into one infinite tone. Maybe that is what awaits us at the end of all music, not noise, not applause, but pure resonance. The sound of existence exhaling. The eternal rest written between the lines. So here we are, at the end, or maybe the beginning, of every note ever played. You have followed whispers through cathedrals, ghostly instruments, cursed frequencies, and symphonies that refuse to die. Maybe you have realized by now that the real haunting is not in the music at all. It is in us. Every heartbeat is percussion, every breath a string section, every thought a fleeting vibration between two silences. The composers we have spoken of, Mozart, Beethoven, Paganini, they did not summon darkness. They simply listened deeply enough to hear what was already there. Perhaps that is why their music feels eternal. It speaks the language of echoes. Even today, each time a bow touches string or a key strikes ivory, the sound radiates outward forever, never truly fading, just stretching thinner as it travels. Somewhere, millions of light years away, the faint ghost of a Mozart requiem might still be trembling through the cosmos. Maybe that is what ghosts really are, echoes of emotion that never found rest, still reverberating through the fabric of reality. And if that is true, then every time you listen, you are part of the haunting too. The air around you is thick with forgotten songs, vibrations older than memory. You are surrounded by sound that never left. You might even be humming one right now. So before this night fades and your screen goes dark, take a breath and listen, not to me, but to the room, to the soft hum of silence beneath your heartbeat. That is the first note, the one that never ended. And if you listen closely enough, you might hear someone or something listening back. Thank you for staying through the story. If any of tonight's melodies linger in your mind, tell me in the comments below which one echoed the loudest for you. Or better yet, what secret do you think your favorite song might be hiding? Sweet dreams, and may your silence always sing.